Welcome to the Mastery Podcast, where stories unlock the secrets of an empowered and abundant life. Allow me to introduce Bryan Hayes, a remarkable individual shaped by profound life experiences. As a single father, Bryan faced the unimaginable tragedy of losing both of his sons just 1 year apart. And he found the strength to rebuild his life and transform his pain into meaning. Join us on this inspiring journey of loss, love, and the enduring human spirit. Welcome to Mastery Podcast, Bryan, and I do appreciate your time. And Bryan is here to talk about his experience with the I know you don't like to use the word passing, so the death of his two sons, just 1 year apart, Ryan and Anthony. Can you tell us a little bit background about yourself, Bryan?
Yeah, and I think I'll start with, I know you had mentioned that I don't use the word passing, and I use the word death. One of the things that I really kind of one of my philosophies is unconditional gratitude and radical acceptance. So in radical acceptance, I want to make sure that I say they've died. What that does, and I keep their ashes near me, so I look at them literally every day as a reminder that this is real. This is what happened, and it's my responsibility in the fact that I'm grateful that it happened to me rather than anybody else. And that being able to radically accept the worst possible things that happen in your life. And then if you can't find gratitude for it, what I found was easiest for me, and I don't mean easy as in easy, but was really more than anything else is just saying, I'm grateful that it didn't happen to someone else. And that has helped me in other areas as well. When something bad happens, well, I'm glad it happened to me because I know that I can handle it and maybe somebody else can't. And most of the time, there's a lot of things that, we don't think we can handle either. Mm-hmm. And it's not until we encounter it and have to face it. And the way I like to face things is head on and not sugarcoat it in terms of my own relationship with myself.
Wow. You're an amazing human being. I know the first time we spoke, I was like, wow, really? You have such, for me, how I explain it is high emotional intelligence, where you embrace the tragedy with such a different way of looking at it, and like you say, you face it head on. And it's been for you, Anthony died in 2020, and can you, and that was during the pandemic, COVID, when COVID hit. So the separation from everybody, cannot get together and all this stuff, make it even more challenging to deal with, to respond to the situation, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and Anthony died of suicide, Ryan of overdose. And I'm very open about that because I know most parents can't. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt. So I feel it's my responsibility to speak openly about both topics. When Anthony had died, I was living with my roommate, Carlos, and his girlfriend, Etty. And we were in the middle of COVID. And at that time, nobody was seeing each other. I mean, everybody was self-isolating. And so it was about 5:30 at night, and I was on the phone with a client, and my mom kept texting me. And when somebody texts you the first time, it's like, oh, okay. After the second, and I told the client, I need to call you back. And so I talked to my mom, and instantly I could tell something was wrong. And she, said that Anthony had shot himself in the face. And my first question was, well, was he still alive? And I went out. I told her I had to go because I kind of had to process. And I went out and I told Carlos, then told Etty, and then went for a walk, is one of the ways that I process. And I went for a walk and I called my sister. And my mom had already called my sister, so she already knew. And my sister had said, well, we have to call Ryan. And she asked if she wanted me to call or her to call. And I said, no, it's my responsibility, which of course is one of the most difficult calls you could ever possibly imagine. And the interesting part is that we still didn't know if it was true or not in terms of if he was still alive. Mm-hmm. So Ryan and I were on the phone and off and on until about 11 at night. Wow. And it wasn't until we called the police, and then they transferred us over to the morgue, and they said that he had been brought in. So both of us were on the phone when we had the confirmation. It was very different than most people that gets told by, like when Ryan died, a police officer came at the door. But the process afterwards is, it's something you don't prepare for. It's instantly, well, who do I call? Who do I don't call? Mm-hmm. And for me, it was going through every contact that I had and going, okay, well, they knew them in some way or another. And some of my friends were very gracious and they said, well, I'll come over. I said, well, no, you can't. Mm-hmm. It doesn't help to have somebody else get sick in the process. So one of the things that I think that kind of helped me, which is very contrary to, I guess, normal thought processes, because everybody always asks, are you talking to somebody? Do you have a support network? No, and no. And that I was by myself. And by being by myself meant I had to deal with it. And I didn't have friends around. I didn't have family. Ryan came down, and Ryan stayed at a hotel, and really it kind of made Ryan and I even closer, because it was basically, and even Ryan, Anthony, and I mean, growing up, it was just us. And so we didn't have, and I will never say we didn't have a fairy tale relationship. We had our ups and downs. Both of them struggled with mental health. Both of them struggled with addiction. As a parent, that means that you're going to have ups and downs, and there's going to be times when they love you. There's going to be times that they hate you. That's the responsibility of being a parent.
So true, so true. And I'm a parent of 2 boys too. And one of the reasons we connected was we share, similar experience. One of my sons died last year, and I kind of reached out to you, and I'm just impressed at how you very open about this, and I think there need to be more conversation, because there are so many people out there with similar experience. Of course, like we discussed, and we know that people go through grief differently. For you, you've been through a lot in life. You have many losses, and you respond in a more calmer manner. And it doesn't mean that it's less painful. It just,
correct.
Yeah. It just, like, on the outside, you tend to, be able to, still go on with your life and make the best out of it, right? And that got to be difficult, though. And that's your world. And they said when a child died, a part of you died with them. And how can you touch on that? I know you're a little bit, you see this thing from a different perspective. How do you see that, that statement?
Yeah, I think that it's so true. And I think that one of the things that's and I'm sorry for your loss. And I think that that's something that when someone experiences loss and even sickness, because we're not taught, because we don't have a conversation about this, and also we're in a society that we kind of just don't want to be around difficult conversations like that. And I think that if you have someone who has experienced some type of loss, and especially death, one of the most important things is, I'm sorry for your loss. My condolences. One of the things that I tell everybody is, what is one story that you can share that makes you smile about the specific person? And what's really different is that, and I've even had professionals say, well, would you want to talk about it? No. Do I want to talk about them? Do I want to talk about him? Absolutely. And I don't know anyone who's experienced loss, more than anything else, they want to talk about them. They want to keep those memories. Yes, it's sad. Yes, it brings out emotion. And it's hard for a lot of people if somebody cries. Well, I don't know how to deal with that. Mm-hmm. Well, you deal it with compassion and empathy and be there. And people will say, well, I'm not sure what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just be there. And when someone dies, and especially when it's a children, and especially in your case, I mean, as a woman, it's part of your DNA. Part of you dies, and it changes you forever. There's nothing that can prepare you. There's nothing that you don't know how you're going to react. I know that after Anthony died, Ryan and I became best friends. And it was only, I would say, a couple months before Ryan died. And there's this exercise, it's a meditation, if you will, and it's a samurai meditation. Mm-hmm. And it's very different than the meditations we do in Western culture, which is focused on the positive. What this is you focus on the very worst thing you could possibly imagine, and you sit with it until you're comfortable. And so I went through and I said, well, what would happen if something happened with Ryan? And then I went through from a scientific standpoint that the odds of something happened to Ryan after Anthony is so minute. If there's any semblance of order in the world, there's no possible way something can happen with Ryan. And then it's, well, what would happen if it did? And I went through you start kind of sweating and you kind of go through well, I don't know. And I really went into, I don't know. I don't know if I would lose my mind. I don't know if I would completely be shattered, so to speak, which is very normal. And I came to the solace of, well, there's just no possible way it could. And then when it was actually about 7:30 in the morning, I was in bed, and there was a knock on the door, and Carlos had a nurse. He was a stage 4 cancer patient, and he was in the latter stages of cancer. And he had a nurse that was coming over, so I thought it was a nurse. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a normal knock on the door, it was a pounding on the door. Yeah. And I didn't want to answer it. Carlos must not either, because he didn't come to the door. And it was Carlos's house. And I came to the door, and about that time, Carlos was right behind me. And I opened the door, and there was a sheriff. And the sheriff handed me a note and said, "You need to call." And I looked down, and it said the county morgue. And I said, "Well, what is this for?" And he said, "Well, there's been an accident." And my brain goes, "Wait a second, you don't call the morgue for an accident." Right. And so my first thought, and one of the things I'm probably different, is I don't think of myself first. I think of other people first. So my first thought is, I don't want to make Carlos more stressful, because I know that stress affects cancer, and I don't want to make him more sick. I don't want him, he's got 2 kids. So I'm thinking about Carlos more than I'm thinking for myself. And then I just went for, and with both Anthony and Ryan, I probably walked the entire day nonstop around the neighborhood.
Wow. And that's how you process the news, pretty much it's going through your mind, what happened and what do I do and who to call and all the stuff. It got to be tough though. And you mentioned, or I read or maybe watched your YouTube video about how you and, was it Ryan, got pretty close. You and Ryan got pretty close after Anthony died. And Anthony was 26 years old.
Yeah, the irony is that they both died at 26. They were a year apart, but they both died at 26. And yeah, when Anthony died, it was a little bit different, because Anthony and I were, I guess you say, kind of estranged off and on for a lot of different reasons. Yeah. And one of the things that when Ryan or Anthony died, we became best friends, and it's a normal process, so to speak, is that it brings us together. So I spoke to Ryan literally 4 or 5 times a day, and if all of a sudden the phone would ring, and it's a trauma response, phone rings, and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh my God, you okay?" And you start becoming, every phone call, every knock on the door, you start having this fight or flight response. And Ryan and I literally wanted to wrap him in saran wrap, want to keep him safe. And we became really, really close and best friends. I spoke to Ryan a couple hours before he died, and he had just got off work, and he said, and he called me, and I know when he's doing well before he even speaks, but he called me, he's like, "Hey, Pops, how's it going?" And that's why I know he was doing well. And he's like, "Hey, Pops, how's it going? I just got off work. My boss said I'm kicking ass." And he had just started a new job. It was a week into the job. So many ironies, but the irony was he was doing the best he'd ever been his entire life. And he just sounded fantastic. "I'm going to go home. I'm going to get some sleep, going to get up from work, go to work." And he sounded so good. And that's a difficult thing to process, that, here's someone who is doing the best they've ever done. And then literally a couple hours later, you get a knock on the door, and there's a lot of questions of what, why, how. And as a parent, one of the life lessons I have not been able to deal with, and I'll share how I've done this, is that I don't have guilt. And the reason being is I've always lived my life like playing cards, is that when you play your cards and do the best you can and leave it all out on the table, then there's not the guilt. With Ryan was in the juvenile detention center, jail. And I remember 99.9% of my friends said, don't go see him for visitation. He needs to learn his lesson. He needs to sit there and think. And my thought was, he's in a cage. He's in a place where humans are not supposed to be. They don't belong in cages. And if you do, a lot of times you become an animal. And we had the best time when I'd come for visitation because there wasn't the distractions. It was just him and I. And, I had friends, well, you're enabling them. That's okay. And that's one of the things that in terms of gratitude is I was a single parent. I didn't have somebody else that said, no, you shouldn't do this. It wasn't a democracy. It was, I made the decision. I made it myself, right or wrong. I stick by my decision. And it's so interesting when my kids were in kindergarten and preschool, respectively. And we were at a birthday party. And my kids were the only ones that were up with the adults eating cake. And all the kids were out playing. And there was a woman that was sitting beside me and she said, your kids are so well behaved. I've never seen kids that are this polite. And oh, you are such a great father. Mm-hmm. I never met her before in my life. And I looked at her and I said, I don't take any credit. She's like, what do you mean? I said, I don't take any credit. It's their choice. It's their life. I can only teach them so much, but they make the conscious decision of how they're going to respond. And when they turn 18 and they do something you don't like, then you'll turn around saying, I'm a terrible parent. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the way from the beginning, so to speak. I think a lot of things that have helped me is my own personal philosophies and view on life.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. That's nice. When stuff like this happen, right? Tragedy, and I call it that because it's traumatic. It's traumatic, and especially a parent. The first person you blame is yourself. Did I do enough? Am I good enough? If I could have done this, should have done this, the could have, should have. And that's been probably 99% of the parent out there. That's how they will react. I had the same, thing that I had to overcome, but you were different. And I believe that's what saved you. And that's how we should look at life in every situation is, you do the best you can. And you don't know if you would have done it different, it would have turned out horrible, worse than it is, or it would have been better. You never know. And all you can do is do the best you can. And like you say, play your cards the way, with the best possible intention, with love. And you mentioned that when, the way you see it is even more so, you have even more gratitude for every day. Every day is a beautiful day. It's the most joyous day. And when we spoke and you're like that, I was like, what is wrong with this dude?
Yeah.
Did he take some happy pills?
Yeah.
But that's a great way to take the difficult experience, right? And give it that meaning. And for me, it's the same thing. It's like every day is a wonderful day. And I'm grateful for the experience that I have. And you're the same way. And I was like, oh yeah, we have a similar way, the way we look at life. It doesn't make it less painful, but, you're not a basket case all the time. And you're living every moment, and just soak it all up. Like when you have with Ryan, right after Anthony.
And I think there's something that people don't understand is that, and the parallel in it is that I've never said that my kids are a drug addict, because that doesn't define them. If, yes, they dealt with alcohol, they dealt with mental health, they dealt with substance abuse, but that didn't define them. With me, there's a lot about me other than I'm a parent. There's a lot about me other than children. There's a lot about me other than death. The two things that I think that we need to understand is that pain is not a contest. And then the other part is that, and this is probably what people don't understand the most, sometimes it's not death that's the most difficult thing to deal with. It's life that is the most difficult thing to deal with. And that the train keeps moving. People keep living their lives. I still have to go to work. I still have to pay my bills. The day after my children died, they don't care if I haven't paid my bill. I still have to pay my bill. And all of these things that I have this term of pedestrian life. It's like not only does time change, but space changes. And everybody's kind of living this pedestrian life of getting upset about things and worrying about really frivolous things when it's like, and so like you said, like my philosophy is every day is the best day of my life, and that there's no such thing as a bad day. There's only moments within the day. And if you look at just you and I, and if somebody happens to be listening right now, it is statistically impossible that you and I are in the same space and time at this moment. Every second of your life had to be exactly the same as every second of my life, even up to 2 seconds before we chose to get on this platform together. If somebody's listening to this, how much of a miracle is it that you're listening right now? And so really looking at every single moment, every single conversation is a miracle. And the things like if somebody gets angry, if somebody doesn't call you back, those are natural parts of life. That is the life that is normal because we all have so much going on. When I say that pain is not a contest, people will come up to me and they'll say, well, you know, I've experienced this, but that doesn't compare to your pain. It's not a contest.
It's not.
Everybody deals with something. Everybody has something. I've known, there was a woman that I had dated and her dog died. And a year later, she died. And she died from a broken heart. Wow. And she never was able to get over that grief from her dog dying. And, you know, people can say really callous and everybody's doing the best they can. But sometimes people will say things, and is it helpful or is it hurtful? And is it, well, it's just a dog? No. Love doesn't know. You love your dog just as much as you can love a human. Love is eternal. Love is in everything. And it's not the love that is the emotional love. It's true love. And that's something that I said with my kids. And I'll share a story with you that was really profound in terms of healing process. So when Ryan died, I went to see my parents and my sister. I went because he was in Colorado at the time, and my sister lives in Colorado. On the way back, I got back to the house, and I'm walking, and it's dusk, so it's almost dark, but it's not completely dark. And I notice in the backyard, because I have to go around back to get to where my part of where my entrance was. And I noticed that there's somebody sitting on a log. And for some reason, I gravitate toward it. Mm-hmm. And it's this kid. And he's about 18 years old. And I've never really spoken to him before. I only say hi every once in a while. But I could tell that something was wrong. So I didn't say anything. I just sat down in front of him and I said, I didn't say, how's it going? I said, what's going on? And he looked at me very angrily, and he almost yelled at me, and he said, my dad just died. Wow. And I looked at him, and I just sat there, and I didn't say anything and let him go. And so he had that day had found his dad in the bathroom who had a heart attack, and he was telling me he should never have to experience this. He should never have to go through this. And he went for several minutes just being really angry and going through that process, which is very normal, and said very little. And we got about half, probably 3/4 the way done. And I said, can I ask you a question, please? He said, well, sure. And I said, do you love your dad? I said, well, of course I do. I said, does your dad love you? I said, well, absolutely. And I said, well, what would your dad want from you more than anything else right now? And he stopped, and it was a break. Like, he went from being angry to being reflective, and that anger completely dissipated. And so I just sat there in the silence and let him answer. And finally he said, my dad would want me to be happy. And his entire persona changed. And I said, yes. True love, which your dad loves you, your dad wants you to be happy, healthy, and wealthy. And the best way you can honor your dad is by living the best possible life you can. And it was a little bit later that his mom, was like, where are you? We didn't have a conversation after, but it was really profound that I didn't mention Ryan. I didn't mention anything about what I was going through, but I was there when he needed it, but he was there when I needed it as well. We both healed in some way from that encounter.
Yeah, I get that sometimes when you can pay forward or help another person, not help, like support them in the moment that they're in, it just makes you feel better. And I think that is the seed in all of us human beings, right? We have that unconditional love and compassion for the other human beings, and when we can express that, it just makes us feel good. And I believe that your loved ones, it could be your dad, it could be your sons, they want the best for you, and the best way to honor them is to live your life fully, with joy, with health, with abundance, with everything. And can't do that wallow in sorrow, right?
Yeah, and I think that the other part that's normal is that it's okay to not be okay. And there's times when I'll go into a place and I'll let it go to wherever it goes, to whatever depths it needs to go to. And everybody's still doing the best they can. Not everybody's going to process the same way. Not everybody is going to have stages of grief the same way. I didn't experience any of those, and that's okay. I think that that's probably the one misnomer, is that we have we love to put things into boxes to make sense of the world.
Right.
But when things happen like this, that there's not an explanation, there's no way to formulate, then we kind of go into, well, let's go to this hyperbole. And really, sometimes it's, I don't know. Sometimes I'm not okay, and that's okay. And I think that the two things that are really important is that forgiveness. And I don't mean in essence forgiving the other person, because that's an individual choice. But the more you can forgive yourself, you did the best you can as a parent. What could you have done differently? Well, you don't know. Well, what could I have done differently as a child? And, I look at, especially like with Ryan, he was doing the best he possibly could. He made a mistake. Whatever happened, I can't change that. But he died of an overdose. And he became a statistic. But he's more than a statistic. He's a human being. There's a lot of conversations to be had around all of that. But I think that where we start from is starting from a heart-centered place, not a fear-based, but a heart-centered place of being okay with difficult conversations, being okay with not being okay, and wherever you're starting from, wherever you're ending from, that, I have friends of mine who are in the same situation, and it's like, I don't know how to get out of bed every day. Well, what I do is not going to necessarily work for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I can support you in your journey, but I can share what's worked for me, but it may work completely different for you. And that's something that I'm very honored about, is that I didn't follow any guidelines. I found my way, and it's not the way that works for everybody. And I respect that. And if somebody's going through something right now, you're going to process in your own unique way.
Thank you for that, Bryan. I appreciate that, because I not necessarily process things the same way as other people, like you don't, and you do share your experience, and I think because you just do things in a like completely different way than anybody I come across, and I think it support other people who are going through what they call grief, who are going through loss. It gives them some, some kind of guideline, not necessary for how they should do it when they gather enough strength, right? Well, Bryan said he did this, he can do that. I'm sure I can do it. Maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. But if you, like you say, allow yourself to feel the emotions, right? If you want to let it out, you can. It's okay.
And something that just came to me is that not only is it okay to not be okay, here's something we don't say. It's okay to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay to be happy.
Yeah.
It's okay to continue your life. It's okay. You're not going to move on. That doesn't mean that their memory is going to fade. It doesn't mean that you're not honoring them. But they still, the more that you can live your life in some way, I truly believe that's the best way you honor them. And if you're living that, because I think that that's something, especially as parents or as children, if your parents die, it's almost like, in some sense, like, well, I have to be a martyr. I have to go through this, and I don't want to be okay, because if I okay, then how somehow they're going to slip away.
Right. I believe that we don't say that enough, and what happened with a lot of people, especially parents, is like they feel guilty if they smile. They feel guilty, like your kid died. How can you smile? You know, and they go on a vacation. Your kid died. How can you enjoy life? And it's like, subconsciously, if nobody say that to you, people are afraid what other people may be thinking of them, right? And they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't appear happy, and me included. I'm like, should I post this picture? I'm smiling. It's at the funeral. I'm smiling. I'm at my kid's funeral. Why am I smiling? And it is okay to be smiling and to be happy. Yeah.
And for us, because of COVID and going back to that, we didn't have funerals. What we did was we had a virtual, it's on my YouTube, is that we had a virtual celebration of life.
Yeah,
and
I saw that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And especially, both of those, but, like with Anthony, there was just so many people from all over. And it was a way for people to come together. And one of the things I really love about the virtual environment is that if you go to a funeral, it's like, does anybody want to come up and speak? It's really intimidating. But if you're in front of, you're sitting at home, it makes it easier to say whatever you want to say and even just cry. And you can have people around being supportive. And it was the same thing for Ryan, as being able to have that community. And I think that was so, because what I've noticed is that when someone dies, it really affects people in ways that you could never possibly imagine. The friends of Ryan's. This weekend, I love this. I got a friend from a text message from Anthony's friend, and hearing that he's doing well, because he took it really hard, but just to reach out and say, hey, I'm doing good. That's fantastic. And that makes my day. And one of the things that was kind of shocking in terms of both Anthony and Ryan is how many friends of theirs have reached out to me. And again, I take that as a responsibility, and being able to be there in some way. And there's also the other part that is this important too, is your own boundaries, in that I don't respond back to everyone. When I say that death is sometimes more not easier, but life, it's better said, life is more difficult. And what I mean by that is death to me is a one-on-one relationship.
Yeah.
So me dealing with death is in my locus of control. Life is not that way at all. Whether it's personally or professionally, there's so many people involved, there's so many things involved, so many variables that aren't my own. And a lot of times that the death itself, that's one thing, but it's life, because you still have to live life. And I know people that, year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 years, 20 years later, don't want to go out of the house, don't want to have to go, because you feel like everybody you see is going to go and talk to you, or, what am I going to say? And, and that's okay too. That's whatever part of the process. And I think that it becomes such a, when I say pedestrian life, is that now my compassion level, my empathy level, because I know every single person I meet for a fact is going through something. And it may not be what I've gone through, but I guarantee you there's not a person in this world that has not gone through something. And if they haven't, they're going to. And there's so many times when what I say, is it helpful or is it hurtful? And yes, somebody may respond in a way that may be angry or maybe, but I don't know what they're going through. And being able to have the empathy of going, yeah, there's times when I've responded that way and I've been short with someone. And I can say that, especially after Ryan died, people will say, well, I reached out to you after. I don't remember. There's so much that goes on. I don't remember who I talked to. I don't remember. And it's not that I can't go back and I've blocked that out. It's just that there's so many things. And unless you've experienced it, it's like, and even the life part, instantly you have to transition into, oh, okay, well, where are you going to have the funeral? What are you going to have? What are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with that? And it becomes so encompassing. And that doesn't even include having to juggle work, having to juggle all these things. And it's something that what really has helped me is continuing going back to every day going, how can I be grateful for this? How can I be in gratitude? How can I take radical acceptance that I don't need to know a reason, but I can be accepting of the emotion and radically acceptance. If I don't feel good, I don't feel good. I'm good with that. And allowing myself to go to a depth and really being able to, when I do the opposite. If I'm not feeling good, I don't go and try to make myself feel better. I listen to the saddest song I possibly can and let myself go even deeper. And the more I allow myself to go through whatever I need to go through, when I come out, I feel lighter. I feel like the next time I'm more resilient to handle things. I feel like that now the things I thought was impossible to deal with aren't as much.
Nice. I can relate to that. Except maybe I don't allow myself to go in depth as much, but I appreciate you sharing that with me. And you're not the only one who say that. A lot of people that I spoke to who experience grief, they said, they just, like one of my friends, she's like, she just schedule a time to cry.
Yeah.
And their whole family deal with the loss differently. So they kind of just like do separate thing and come together and support each other. And, even within the same family, you're going to do things differently. And to speak on the compassion part,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, I thought I was the most compassionate people in the world until it really hit you. And then you think, oh my gosh, people are going through different things. It doesn't need to be a death of a child. It could be anything. And it just completely changed you.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I feel like I've become a better person,
Yeah. There's a story that I heard a couple years ago, and I know this doesn't resonate with everyone, and I know this doesn't work for everybody, but there was a woman who, and it's a true story, and her husband was murdered, brutally murdered in front of her. And for weeks, she couldn't sleep, naturally. And all of a sudden at night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, she kept hearing forgiveness. She kept hearing forgiveness. And went the next day, went to the jail, and she met the guy. Went face to face to the guy. And the guy cussed her out. The guy, don't ever come back. Went home that night, couldn't sleep. Forgiveness. went back to the jail, went back and spoke to him, and continued the same process. He would cuss her out, don't come back, very short conversations, until one day he just totally lost it, broke down, and said his story. And his story was that all of his life, everybody thought he was a monster. Everybody felt like you're going to end up being a nobody. And he's like, I became what everybody thought I was going to be. And after that breakthrough, she continued to go see him, and they became friends. Wow. And she went to the parole board and said, I don't want him to be executed. They overruled, and he went to the execution to support him, not to seek vengeance. And so what that means by that is she was able to continue living her life. Whereas before, if she would have stayed on that same path, she may not have. She might have held on to that anger, that resentment. All those things are very normal. Mm-hmm. But what she did more than anything else is she gave herself forgiveness.
Nice.
And in that case, without putting words in her mouth, there's no way that she doesn't go, well, what should I do differently? What could I have done? Why didn't I do something? But being able to utilize that in a compassionate way, and that to me is the highest level of compassion, is seeing someone not for a single event that they did, no matter how atrocious, not condoning what he did whatsoever, but being able to understand that there's layers to it. Yeah. And that when we go back to even ourselves, that how do we forgive ourselves? How do we not feel guilty? And part of that in my philosophy is everybody's doing the best they can, not in terms of pure potentiality, but in each space and time, everybody's doing the best they can. And again, I remember talking to somebody years ago, it's about 25 years ago, and the guy got so angry about that. And he's like, not everybody's doing the best they can. You look at somebody who's really wealthy and they're on the beach in Key West, and you're not doing anything with their life. And I'm like, but that's what's best for them. Yeah. They've come to a place that they don't need to be a status symbol of having a title. They're going and they're living their life the best they want to be. They're relaxed and enjoying life. And that might not work for you, but it works for them. And how about we just be happy? How about we be happy for somebody else's success? Why not be compassion when somebody has a failure instead of looking and blaming them? How about we go and want to see someone successful without wanting anything in return? And those are really difficult things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. Not everybody success or happiness looks the same way, right?
Yeah.
And we are doing the best we can. I mean, you're like the most happiest person in the world,
Yeah.
With your situation and the way you want to live your life, right? And that's how I really talk to other people is, I cannot tell you how to be happy. You need to figure that out on your own, what your passion is, what you want to do in life. It's your experience to go through that journey on your own, and all we can do is just look at them and say, yeah, I'm happy for you.
And you're doing a great service. And what you're doing for people, for women, is essential. It's important. And we need that. And it is vital. I think everybody has a voice. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a background. Everybody has a unique way of giving back to the world. And I applaud you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. Oh my gosh. I watched that video that you put on YouTube. Was it 10 days after Anthony? And you list the 10 things. And I think that's, and I will put a link below this interview. The 10 things that people can do that will not support you going through the process of, the grieving, the acceptance, and just going through the emotion. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are cool. And can you touch on just a little bit? You said, don't hurt yourself, right?
Yeah.
That was
I think that the way that the catalyst of that is people would say, well, we have books and stuff as this is what to say. Well, what about what not to say? Mm-hmm. What about things that can't support me? Mm-hmm. And part of that is that I have to go through this myself. Mm-hmm. It is the loneliest journey you're ever going to have. Mm-hmm. You have to go through it yourself. Not hurting yourself is so important, and that is that it doesn't help anything by hurting yourself. And that is something that is physical, mental, emotional, and even it now pains me when I hear people that will say, oh, geez, I'm stupid, or no, you're not. So you made a mistake. No big deal. Give yourself a break. And be soft. And I know we live in a hard world that everybody has to be hard, but give yourself a break. And I think that the more that we can, even just ask the question, is this helpful or hurtful? What am I doing? If this is not working, and I think that's there's such courage and commitment to, and this goes back to when Ryan was in the detention center and being countless times as a single parent, is that I do things different than everybody else. Yeah. But it worked for me. And sometimes it didn't, but it's still my choice. And being able to change. Okay, this doesn't work anymore. Well, then I change. I evolve and continue to evolve. And when a tragedy happens, there's no possible way that you're ever going to stay the same. Sometimes you change. Sometimes life changes you.
Mm-hmm. Right. Good way of saying that. You mentioned so many different things. I wrote them down here, 10 different things. I just want to, and you did mention you want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about, you want to talk about your son. You want to talk about Anthony. You want to talk about Ryan, and it's okay. I think I read somewhere, from all the research I've been doing. You said there are times when you go to places and your life must go on, and people will ask you, like, do you have any kids? How are they doing? Or especially when they haven't seen you a while and they know you have 2 kids, like, oh, how are your kids? I get that too. How do you respond to that and still be okay with it? Because people will they will get shocked and they will not know what to say, and then they just get quiet, right?
So I instantly have a different take on that. Mm-hmm. So when somebody asks, I go, wow, this is a great opportunity that I get to speak about my children. Mm-hmm. So typically what's happened, and I remember right after Ryan died, and there's studies that showed that parents after 20 years are a lot of times emotionally in a more difficult, shall we say it frankly, worse place than they were right after. And that's in part because of society, and especially with different types of death. Like if it's the normal death of, say, a grandfather, that's the normal process of life. But if you have an unexpected death, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, whether it's what's very different, and the one with children especially, is no matter how long you live, people are naturally going to ask the question, being generally curious, do you have children? And it's, for me, it's that I did. And then sometimes they get it. What are they doing now? Well, and for me, it's depends on the situation, depends on how I feel. I'm not going to answer it the same way all the time. Mm-hmm. And when I'm in a place of feeling like sharing, then I'll say, they died, and I appreciate you asking. It's okay. Don't feel bad about asking, and really being empathetic to the other person, because instantly they have no idea what to say. Instantly they're in almost panic mode, and they go into a fight or flight mode. And I mean, run. I don't know what to do, or they freeze because they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And on my part is being extremely empathetic of looking at it from their point of view, and that they don't know what to do. And so then that's my opportunity to help them and guide them and take their hand and lead them in a direction that will not make them feel bad for asking the question. And then I will say, no, I don't want to talk about it, because it means death. No, I don't want to talk about their death. I want to talk about them, because what happens in our society is we don't have rituals. We don't have, like in Mexican culture, the Day of the Dead, where you go and you celebrate and you talk about and you share stories. In Native American culture, you have oracle and you share stories. One of the commonalities that I've, not only for myself, but so many people, is when somebody dies, it's like they just disappear. People don't ask about them. People are so afraid of the conversation. And especially after Ryan died, I had friends that just disappeared. And it was because they could not face the fact that this could possibly happen to anyone. And so by seeing me means that by guilt by association is that if I don't get near me, then the less chance that something's going to happen. And it's again going back to compassion, going back to empathy. But one word is just being courageous and being lovingly courageous.
You are very courageous indeed. So I thank you for that, because I don't know what to say when people come and ask, you have kids? And then sometimes I avoid answering. I was like, I have 2 sons, and then just move on. Yeah. And then sometimes I said, my older one passed away. And then, then you get emotional about it. And then you're in the public place, like, I don't want to be emotional in the public place. What do I say now? And then, I'm like thinking, okay, what do I say to people next time? Because they're going to ask.
Yeah, and I think part of that is that being okay with not having to answer and giving yourself permission that that's a boundary, that there are going to be times where you're not in the place, whether it's just time, If somebody asks, that's going to be an extended conversation. If you need to be someplace else, and giving permission that, well, it's lying if I say that I have 2 children.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
No,
it's true. I have
true.
2 children, and being okay with giving permission that, and it takes practice. And part of that practice is being in places where you're going to have that conversation, and it's meeting new people and being in places that, and trying to do that in a place where you're in a really good place, and having, okay, I'm okay with speaking with this. For a lot of people, that works with group therapy, where you're able to, in a group environment, go into that and having that support. Sometimes it's individual therapy. Sometimes it's a friend. Sometimes it's a colleague. Sometimes it's just that conversation with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that voice in your head, and being able to be, and one exercise and one technique that I've used, I used to wake up about 25 years ago, wake up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, can't get back to sleep. And I would just be so frustrated with it. Like, I have to go to work. I need to go to sleep. And it just made it worse. And one day, very organically, I went and I just said, I'm so grateful to be up here waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. This is where I have the best ideas. This is where my most cosmic connection, and that just surreal feeling connected with the world. And I'm just so grateful to be awake, and wow, I'm going to be fine. It's okay. And instantly I fell asleep.
Nice.
And it's being able to not fight it, but embrace it, which is sometimes the most difficult thing to do, is embracing it.
Embracing it. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions that they are afraid to ask. And I'm going to ask you.
Absolutely.
Many questions. How in the world do you deal with it? Do you go, I know you have a different worldviews, but do you go to therapy?
The great question, and I'm happy to answer this. I didn't, and then I had so many people that would say, well, you have to talk to someone. You have to talk to somebody. And went to a therapist for what I realized is that we basically just talked. And she ended up getting pregnant, and it was good timing. That what really helped me more than anything else was being alone. Writing is a beautiful catharsis for me. Writing, walking. There's a lot of the meditations I make up myself. So there's a walking meditation that I do, that you just walk, but slow down, start noticing the trees, but not just noticing trees, individual leaves of the trees, individual blades of grass. And then I go through this exercise where I visualize a person. It doesn't matter who it is, live, not past, doesn't matter. If I like them, doesn't matter. I visualize them happy, healthy, and wealthy, and just living the best life that they can. Then I let that go. Then I have another name come up, and I just continue doing that over and over and over. And if I'm in a weird spot, oh my gosh, I get done and my heart is burning. The other one that works for me is music. And that's been a staple. That for me, music is as personal as you can get. And being alone with my music, my girlfriend's been a great support network. My parents have been a great support network. My sister I talk to every day. I talk to my sister, my parents every day. We don't necessarily talk about this at all, but it's just being there. And really how I've done it, and I think that the coping mechanism was, after Ryan died, that was so sudden. It was just so shocking, especially since I had that conversation with him just a couple hours before. And I was walking the next day. I was talking to my sister, and we're having this rather organic conversation. And all of a sudden I said to her, I'm grateful that it happened to me. I take ownership of it. I take responsibility of it. It happened to me. I don't care about knowing why it happened to me, but I embrace it, meaning that it did happen to me. I am going to talk about suicide. I'm going to talk about overdose. I'm going to humanize both of those. And through those aspects, gratitude, acceptance, and really not judging myself. Mm-hmm. Other people are. And here's radical acceptance. I know that there are people that go, wait a second, because this is where we live in a transactional society. Mm-hmm. If something goes well, we go, well, you must have done something right. Mm-hmm. If something goes wrong, well, you must have done something wrong. And then I have 2 children that died. So there's no way that there's not people that go, well, if you had to do something wrong, that's fine. That's your opinion. You can have your opinion. I graciously decline.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. That's a good way to look at it. And people will have opinions. You can be like the greatest saint. Oh my gosh, people have an opinion about Jesus and Buddha, Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
And, who are we? We're humans. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that because I always wonder what people do to deal with that. And when you go talk to someone like a therapist, I'm not saying don't go. I say go because I still go every couple of weeks or so. I go. And it need to be someone who you trust, for some people, it could be your family, your sister, your girlfriend, and talk to somebody.
The other part too is being really what works for you. When I say music, I laugh. I like heavy metal music. Wow. And people go, wait a second, how can you? But when I listen to heavy metal music, it calms me down. I listen now less and less to heavy metal music, but I listen to music that Anthony liked and Ryan liked. Yeah. So there's that connection of, oh, I can see why you like it. And I, there's a couple songs like before I didn't really like country music, but now listen to some of the country songs that Anthony really liked and really going, wow, I like that. And music is such a beautiful way to connect. One of the things I did after both my kids died is doing videos where I would take their pictures and put music behind them and put them on up to YouTube. Like with my writing, I write from a perspective of being very vulnerable. I will say from men and women, men typically have, you're not supposed to be vulnerable. My viewpoint is the opposite, is that through vulnerability, that's how we gain trust, not only with ourselves, but with the world. And that when I write, I like to share my writing. And I understand even when I write and I write something that's not inspirational, positive, people go, oh, is everything okay with you? Well, that's people caring. That's all.
Yeah.
But sometimes it becomes overwhelming. And that's a part too. When life becomes overwhelming, being able to have the boundary of saying, not today. I am not in a place where I can talk about that today.
Yeah, I hear you. And you do, I brought up your website here, very beautiful. I mean, you write poems, you write so many things. I would want to read this. You write something about peace I have found in a world of chaos. I have not only 2 children that I call my own, but I call them the children of the universe as well, as we share in one family. It's just so beautiful. I mean, every word, it's just so deep. You're very talented.
Thank
Bryan.
you.
I saw some of the video of your kids playing guitar, singing, and they must have got that creative side from you. And do they write poems too? I think Anthony.
Ryan really wrote a lot. What I did not realize as much is that Anthony loved to draw, and both of them kind of, in a humor standpoint, loved tattooing, and they would practice on themselves. So they would tattoo themselves. And I was talking to Anthony once, and he had this tattoo on his leg. What is that? And he's like, shut up. And I'm like, what? But I loved Anthony that he didn't take himself seriously. It's that, I don't care. And he had such an old soul. I mean, 2 years old, he was saying things that was out of this world. And their creative streak, Ryan would read in junior high. I kept waking up and the lights were on. Like, why are the lights on? And I finally realized that he would stay up at night and read a novel a night.
Wow.
And it's so amazing that there's a lot of, and that's another part of coping. That was a way that they coped. A way to deal with grief is painting, writing, that creative outlet of being able to express emotions and all emotions, sadness, anger, happiness, and sometimes it's those emotions that are the most difficult. Sometimes happiness is the most, because there can be a guilt of when you go out and, like you said, you're at the funeral and you're smiling, and it's how, why, and it's coming to a place that, and when I'm in a really good place, is that I love you. Thank you. I hate you. Thank you. I like that. Thank you. I don't like that. Thank you. And not having an explanation.
Yeah.
Not having to explain.
Yeah. And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's just okay. Nice. Beautiful. Wow. Our time's coming up to an end here. We've been talking for like over an hour, and you're just a wealth of wisdom. And I appreciate your worldview, which make difficult situations so much better to deal with, easier to deal with. And I appreciate you coming on here. And when on the lighter side, not that it's not bad or anything. It just I found it really easy to speak to you on this topic. You're just very easygoing, and you're very just truthful and authentic about everything, unapologetically you, and it's so awesome. It's so awesome, and I would just like, I'm gonna start following you. I'm shocked that you're not like way out there more. Amazing work. I can't wait. I hope you're working on a book or something.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate you for taking the time to speak with me. I am sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And my condolences. You are doing amazing. And please continue doing everything you're doing.
Thank you. And I'm also sorry for your loss. And thank you. And continue doing what you're doing. Even more. Oh my gosh, you're amazing. And I ask all my guests this, and I'm not sure if you have time to kind of reflect on your 3 wishes. If you have a genie in a bottle, and I know you may think differently, and if you can, ask Ginny for the 3 wishes, what would your 3 wishes be?
Number one, $150 million.
Mm-hmm.
So $150 million, the numbers are arbitrary. $150 million, but that way I can help 150 million people in 150 different ways. It's not about just being happy, not just about being healthy, but it's about being wealthy. It's not about being rich, it's about being wealthy. So it's a wealth of support, a wealth of friends, but a wealth of time to do what you want, where you want. Second wish, I'm going to go the opposite. What I don't wish for is I can't wish for peace. And what I mean by that is that it's easy to say, I don't want people to go through pain. But we have to go through pain. It's part of the journey. It's a part of the process. It's part of life. The longer we live, the more that we're going to experience pain, the more we're going to experience loss. I can't wish for someone to not experience that. I can only wish that they find peace at the end of their journey, and that each person finds their own individual peace, love, and happiness in whatever way that works for them. And my third wish, I wish I just used that as kind of keep it in the bottle, because you never know when you might need it.
You never know when you might need your last wish.
Exactly.
Thank you. And may all your wishes come true. But before I say any more to that, I want to present you with a blue ribbon. It's a gift. May I give it to you?
Absolutely.
I think you know what this is.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it?
I don't think I do.
Oh my gosh, you're gonna love this. But anyway, let me present this to you. I want to honor you, Bryan, for coming on this podcast, sharing story, really, for being, just open about everything, for being positive, for being, just an example of how we can respond to tragedy in our life, and how we can even live life with joy, and while embracing the sorrow that comes with it. And I just want to honor you for doing all that, for taking the time being here, and I really appreciate getting to know you, and I'm sure we'll talk multiple times more. And I want to place this on your heart. It goes right there, pointing up to the sky where all your wishes come true. And it's a tradition for me to take a spark from my heart and put it on yours, press on the cheerleader on here, and it makes a sound bing, where all your wishes come true. May you have that $150 million.
I love that.
And another wish will come true. But this blue ribbon actually saved a boy's life.
Wow.
From suicide. It was created by Grandma Sparky. It's been around for like over 40 years. Grandma Sparky is like 80 years old now, but she go to like schools and stuff like that, helping kids, honoring each other, and stop bullying and spread the love. And the true story is this blue ribbon was given to a man, and a man went home with 2 extra ribbon. And he gave it to his son, and just honoring him, just being a son, and then he said, "I love you." And then the boy just broke down and cried. And he took out the gun and the letter from the drawer, and he said, "I was going to kill myself tomorrow because I didn't think that you and Mom loved me."
Yeah.
And it's like,
I will close on this. One of the things I've said, and I so love this, because one of the things I'm so grateful that I found before, it's about a year before Anthony died. The only 3 sentences I ever need in my vocabulary: I love you, I support you, and I'm proud of you.
Beautiful.
In every communication, I love you, I support you, and I'm proud of you.
I love you, I support you, and I'm proud of you. Nice. I will add that. I mean, I have that in my vocabulary, but I will use it more. And I love you, I support you, and I'm proud of you, Bryan, for
Thank you.
Doing such a great job. Thank you so much. Thank you for being on this podcast. And I would love for you to come back and tell some more stories. And, I'll follow you on your channel, and I will put it down here, where everybody can look you up and see where you at, what you do. Beautiful poems, beautiful writings, and all the stuff that you put up for your kids, your memory of them, amazing. You're an amazing father, amazing human being, and thank you so much for being on this podcast.